Everyone, thank you so much for tuning in. It's morning for me, but I know that there are so many different time zones that we are working in, and I'm super, super excited to be with you this for me, morning. And as I was preparing for our time, and I had a real sense that this morning I will be speaking straight and directly into the future of humanity. Because I believe that so many of the beautiful things that will be created in our world will be created by men and women like you, by men and women who have the type of skill set that you guys have and the things that you guys are discussing in this space. So I am honored. I also understand that words matter. All the difficult things that we get to experience in our world, we get to experience because somewhere a word was spoken about them. And at the same time, the beauty that we get to experience in our world, we get to experience because somewhere words were spoken about that or about such beauty. And so it is, again, a real honor to be with you. My name, yes, is Noel Musicha. And if you're wondering what that name is from or where that name is from, I'm right now standing in an under-resourced community in San Diego, in California. But I am an immigrant here. I'm an immigrant from Malawi in Southeast Africa. And if you don't know Malawi or where Malawi is, it's pinched somewhere around where Tanzania, Zambia, and Mozambique are. Somewhere in the middle is a republic of Malawi. Malawi is by GDP one of the poorest countries in the world. So I've gotten to experience the poorest country in the world and gotten to experience one of the most powerful civilizations that humanity has ever known here in the United States, but at the same time, living among the poor. And as my story goes, I came here to San Diego as a soccer player, football player, let's just get that right. And I came on a scholarship, playing for a college here in the United States. My aim was always that after I graduated, I'll move to Europe and go play there, because when I moved here, I already had the credentials to be able to, to take the sport to the next level. Somewhere in the window when I was contemplating my next move and had one or two contracts on the table that I was looking at, I was running a little event for youth, again, here in San Diego, in a neighborhood called Linda Vista, which is one of the most distressed neighborhoods in our city. I was running an event there for youth, and different people came through. And among the people that came through were these three young students. They were in high school at the time. They were walking by and they had a soccer ball with them. So they started to try and mess with the people that were at the game with the soccer ball. And then they came to me. They didn't know that this was my sport. They found out very quickly. And after a brief moment of maybe being embarrassed a little, they asked me, they say, hey, do you think that you'll be open to coaching us? Now, again, bear with me, I'm going somewhere with this. They asked me, do you think that you'll be open to coaching this? And the reason they asked is because here in the United States, the sport of soccer has been moved from the poor. It's been made an elite sport that you can really only play if you pay to play. So many of the families that just can't afford those kind of dollars and cents are left out of a game that is really global, that is really a sport among the poor all around the world. Anyway, it's actually accessible to all. This, in many ways, told me a lot of what I needed to know about our communities here sociologically. So I said, all right, I'll be open to helping you guys out. Meet me, this was a Friday, meet me on a Monday at the park. In my mind, I'm thinking, okay, when I show up there, it's going to be, those three showing up. I showed up at the park and there was about 20 kids there. And I was like, all right, this is interesting. So I'll coach them, But as I coach, I understand, and I understood then what I understand even more now, that soccer itself, sports itself, is only a catalyst, is only a medium that we can use to communicate other more important concepts. So what I would do is every time they come, I will give them a concept. So for instance, I'll give them a concept of vision. We will then define vision. We might say something like, okay, a vision is a clear picture of, is a clear mental picture of what could be, followed by the conviction that it should be. Then when I would do that, I would then demonstrate on the field what to have a vision might look like and to not have a vision might look like. So every session was a session about soccer, but it was a session about life. So I'll say, hey, if you're in this position, you make this pass because you panicked, that might represent a lack of vision. Or you make this pass because you have the presence of mind to be able to see more on the field, that represents having a vision. Then I'll give them an assignment as they go home, and I'll say, what I want you to do is, as you walk back through the neighborhood, dilapidated, beaten up in many ways neighborhood, I would say, as you walk back, I want you to observe where you see vision in the community or where you see lack of vision. And I want you to do the same at home. I want you to look at where you see vision within your household or where you see lack of vision. When we come back the following session, the first thing would be a report back. So the students would go, and they're really taken to this, and they'll come back and they'll always report back on what they saw. You know, whether, oh, I saw this graffiti that said this and that, and I think writing something like that in a public place represented lack of vision. Oh, I saw this mural that was painted here and it had these words on it. And I thought that having that represented having a vision. They will say the same thing about in their homes, or something that I heard my dad say to my sister. I just felt like that was those words were very limiting. And we will talk about those things in such a fashion. As we did that, we began to know each other as a people. And as I got to know them more, I wasn't living in their community at the time, but as I got to know them more, I started to hear stories from the neighborhood, stories of both beauty, but also stories of tragedy. The story that kept repeating itself, that was a story of tragedy, was a story of gangs, gang violence, and gang killings within the neighborhood. And that really struck me. As the young people were explaining to me the choices that they have to make. And one thing that one of the students said that was pretty like shocking and maybe disturbing to me, said, oh, coach, you think that we just choose to pick sides on the gangs? The reason why we get affiliated actually is because if you're coming from school one day and you get jumped unexpectedly by one of the groups and you're not affiliated with anyone, you are literally on your own. So we affiliate so that maybe when we are jumped, we have the support we need, because our streets in our neighborhood are dangerous. And like I said, I wasn't living in this neighborhood at the time, and I would go home, and man, I would just go home and I would sit and I would just stare at the window, thinking and contemplating. One day, and this happened actually a couple of times, where my wife came to me and she was like, "What are you thinking?" You know? And I was like, you know how guys we can be. Nothing. But we all know that nothing is something, right? And so one day, you know, she caught me in one of those dazes where I'm thinking, I'm just staring at the window, and she said, "What are you thinking?" And I say, "No, these kids keep telling me stories about, you know, violence in the neighborhood and how dangerous their streets were. They keep telling me stories about gunshots, and here I'm mentoring them. But I believe that if I were to be in proximity with them, I believe that if they were telling me stories about gunshots the night before, the night that rang the night before, and I myself heard the gunshots because I lived in that neighborhood, my own sense of urgency in leading them will change, because proximity with people changes us. And so she said, all right, so what are you thinking then? So I said, you know what? I think that we should relocate into the neighborhood. And she's like, you are saying that we should leave our nice or intact neighborhood right now. And you're suggesting that instead of pursuing this American life of upward mobility, that we should pursue downward mobility. And I said, exactly. That is what I am suggesting, because I'm seeing the way in which we are wired as a couple. I'm seeing the way in which I am wired and gifted. And why do we always take these gifts and go serve them to people that already are well served? Let's take our best gifts and serve them to humanity and serve them. Don't be shy about serving them to the materially poor and to the pushed out. And so we moved into the neighborhood. And then the reality rang in very quickly. Sure enough, we would hear these gunshots. Sure enough, we would see the difficulties on our streets as young people are just trying to pursue, say, their education in the neighborhood. Back then, we didn't have children, and now we have 3. But we used to say that later on, when we have our children, and we are raising our children on the streets, again, our sense of urgency to make this place better just goes higher and higher. And we are experiencing that right now. We've had many, many opportunities to send our kids to private schools in the neighborhood. And we've always said, nah, we're going to stay in the public school system, because this is where the children of our neighbors go. And we want to experience this, and we don't want to run. We want to make this place better. So now let's go to the slide that you're currently looking at. To get a little bit of relief, we have these things that we now call family retreats, where we would leave the neighborhood once a quarter. We would leave the neighborhood and just kind of like be in a different place. And one day, I was on Hollywood Boulevard. And as you can probably already tell, I am a raging extrovert. And so I would go out of the hotel and I'll just pace up and down and just watch people go back and forth. And as I did, I started to contemplate about Hollywood particularly, but Los Angeles generally as a city. And I was like, what is this place? And I realized that whenever I would travel to Malawi in Southeast Africa, home, I might travel, say, to Malawi, wearing the newest pair of like sneakers that just came out fairly recently in the US. And I'll end up in Malawi, one of the poorest countries in the world, and I'll find somebody else wearing the same sneakers. And I'm like, well, how do you even know about these things? The reality is, there's somebody who tells the story of the world that determines certain choices that we make. In per capita, Los Angeles is just one of those places, one of those cities that has one of the highest concentration of storytellers in the world. That's LA. But then I also traveled here to Washington, DC. And as I was wandering through DC and touring through DC, it hit me that Washington, DC has a story too that it tells. And DC might be one of the highest concentrations of power in the world. So that is Washington, DC. But lately, I've also taken up a habit of particularly traveling to African cities, because there's something that happens in African cities that is super, super unique and beautiful. And one of the recent cities I got to travel to is a place called Accra, here in Ghana. I traveled to Accra in Ghana because Accra was the first independent city in Africa. And I wanted to pick up how a people in an independent, the first independent city in Africa, how they vibe, how they behave, how they think, because nothing just happens. So how are these people? How do they think? What is the makeup of their culture that caused them to do what they did back then with Kwame Nkrumah? I was listening to a speech once given by Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., and in it, he was describing that he and his team were in Accra, in Ghana, when Ghana first became independent. They were there for that celebration. And they said that in many ways, what they picked up in Accra, in Ghana, spurred them on towards their own like civil rights movement and to make things better for the people in the United States. We are on that journey now. So that is Hollywood, a storytelling city. Washington, D.C., a high concentration of power in the world. Places like Accra, places that are optimistic and hopeful. And you can't go and spend time in Accra and not leave there being hopeful about the future of humanity. But as I have observed all these different places, and I've been to a place, to Rwanda and places like that, one of the things I have learned about people is almost always, you see this in people, that the people who tell the most compelling story in the world shape the future. Whoever tells the most, whoever takes their best gifts, and this is why I'm here, whoever takes their best gifts and use those gifts to tell the most compelling story will be the people that will shape the future. But here's a sad reality, my friends. The sad reality is that evil men and women, and we can observe this in our world right now in 2022, evil men and women don't have to ask for permission from anybody to create terrible futures for humanity. Evil men and women do not ask anybody for permission to create terrible futures for humanity. And I want us to be a good but not passive people. I want us to use our best gifts to serve. And in that, I've seen it wherever we have started these sort of fires around the world, that people really will do it. Whoever tells the most compelling story shapes the future. Whoever tells the most compelling story shapes the future. So let me go back to that story about gangs and gang violence. This is my problem in my community. In my community, and they have now just, they came to ask me at the beginning of the pandemic if I would not mind stepping in as a presidency of our town council. They came to ask me, and almost always when I give my speeches, I actually never talk about gangs typically. I never talk about these guys. And the reason why I don't talk about gangs is because I believe that the reason why our young people in our neighborhoods follow these guys is because they are currently out recruiting us. For better or for worse, even though their story time and time again ends up with our young people in our communities being locked up in jail and in prison. And yesterday, I just got off a phone call with such a young man who was in jail, who said to me, I'm gonna have to be gone. I'm gonna be in prison for a year. And this is not the first time that this happened. He called me straight from jail yesterday. But the reason this happens is because these guys are currently the ones telling the most compelling story. And so I have an idea. What I've done is realizing that they are the ones telling the most compelling story. I've created a thing called a life economics flower for the neighborhood. The concept with the flower is that we will get our people in the community cross-generationally to begin to create a counter narrative about who we are. And so what we've been working on is to create spaces where we're doing urban gardening cross-generationally so that good is spreading in our world. We are creating a sports pathway, because this is part of our expertise, a sports pathway for the community that actually works, so that we are not asking our young people at the high school level to do something that we did not give them the tools to be able to do at the elementary and the middle school level. We are stepping in there. We can't always be talking about how our neighborhood is under-resourced and therefore we can't do this and we can't do that. We are recruiting, fathers and mothers to be able to step in and to stand in the gap as a community to move our neighborhood forward. We are having a conversation, curating a conversation about money, just an understanding of what money is and what are people doing with money. I ask myself this often, and I ask some of the young people in the community, well, what is money, right? How is it possible that the American dollar, which is just a piece of paper, is worth more than the Malawian kwacha, which is also just a piece of paper? Let's talk about that. And then along with it, what are people doing with money these days, and getting an understanding of that, of, when you're hearing things like Bitcoin, what is that? Let's talk about that. And as we do, our idea is that we can start from a conversation about money and end up with a conversation about STEAM, which is being taught in the schools. So, that is a conversation about, technology and science. But if we start with money and we end up with an app, we can talk about technology and science in a way that is way more effective, in a way that is way more street survey, because the game has to be us being able to take these concepts that we hear, these concepts that are learned in schools and colleges, and bring them down street level. We are discussing micro businesses, creating interfaith networks so that people are beginning to pull together and not begin to pull apart. We are working on arts and sports, and our idea right now for the neighborhood is to buy a trailer, to buy a trailer that will have equipment, music and art equipment, and we'll drive it around the neighborhood after school, park it at a school, open it, pop it all up, and it's all these music instruments, and we have young people come there and just jam and learn something different other than the life of the gangs and what that ends up doing for them. Then we are leaving spaces for us to prototype, think through, things like working with our local mechanics to train our young people on the basics of cars, changing oil in your car, changing your tire in your car, all the little basics that our people that already have the skills in the neighborhood can teach. We call this, by the way, asset-based community development. Asset-based community development. So we're not looking at communities for their deficiencies. We're looking at communities for what they are able to actually do. So these are some of our young people we've been talking about, already busy in that gardening space. And in the garden, we're going to talk about science. You can't tell me that there's no math here. There's better math here than in a college classroom. So let's have at it. Bringing communities together cross-generationally. The man that you're seeing right now in white hair, African-American gentleman, has been known for years in our neighborhood as a community drunk. He was always drunk when I first met him about 5 years ago. He's now cleaned his life up. How has that happened? He has been in an environment right now with us and among us that has been positive, and he's reclaimed the fact that he can be a neighborhood asset. And so now he gathers with us to be able to make a contribution to the neighborhood. Story matters. Whoever tells the most compelling story shapes the future of humanity. We are creating spaces of art. What you're looking at right now is a mobile shower unit that we inspired our community to raise some funds to buy. We're gonna use this to provide showers to folks in our community that are homeless. So we are providing showers for them and begin conversations with them that have already begun about what's next for you. Is there can we speak about hope again, even as you're sleeping on the streets? And we've seen these conversations begin to pick up steam in our community. This photo, and I'm almost to the end of the presentation, this photo almost breaks my heart because this is Kelly Rose. Kelly currently sleeps on the street. She is not only homeless, mentally, she is the sickest person in our community. But last week I was running a conference in the neighborhood, and Kelly Rose came through, sat, ate with us, and at the end offered to do dishes, and she's cleaning. And that gives me a glimmer of hope that there's something taking place in this relationship, even at the time when Kelly is not all 100% there mentally. We know that there is something that she can give, and so we're creating that space for her to be able to contribute to making the community better. Kelly's brother, you probably saw one of the pictures earlier of a man who was sitting in a wheelchair. Kelly's brother was paralyzed when he was in college from the hips down. So he sits in a wheelchair. But when he heard that Kelly has found a community among us, he said, I definitely, if you let me, want to join and participate in this community because I'm seeing what this is doing to and for my sister. There's room for everybody when we begin to take our gifts and not only think about upward mobility, but think about downward mobility, to use our gifts to meet some of life's greatest challenges. This is a picture from yesterday. 50 young people from our local middle school coming through to us and essentially say in the after school hours, in the out of school hours, 50 young people from the middle school alone coming to us and saying essentially, inspire me, inspire me. And we have to take responsibility of that. And I believe once again, and I implore you to believe with us here, but also wherever you are all around the world. I want you to know that wherever you are, whoever uses their best gifts to tell the most compelling story to humanity will be the one that shapes the future. Whoever tells the most compelling story. And this is the thing among people, that actually as you tell a more compelling story over and over again, people just begin to organize themselves around you. It is a reason why I was not shocked when I got that phone call from the president of our town council saying, hey, could I meet with you? And I was like, yeah, I'll be open to meeting with you. And so we sat down and he said, hey, we've been looking at the community. We've been looking at the different ways in which people are engaged in the community. And we all in our council agree that you have to be our next leader as a president of our council. I didn't go to seek that. I used my gifts. I used my limited gifts and opened doors and provided opportunities for young people to be able to learn certain skills and certain things. And by doing that, somebody else comes through that is in power and saying, no, we actually want to hand power in that direction. So, ladies and gentlemen, spend your life and your finest gifts. And I saw you. I read many of the bios of the people that were here, especially the speakers. I saw you. And I've had the chance to spend some time with Carvin. So I feel like I get a sense of how you might be as a people. And I know that you are gifted. But I challenge you and I implore you this morning, again, morning for me, it might be a different time zone for you, to use your greatest gifts to conspire for good, for the sake of humanity. Remember, among us, he or she who tells the most compelling story will shape the future for humanity. God bless.
Wow. I felt the change in the story with the optimism you'd mentioned to me as you started. I can feel it, and I love the fact you updated it with stories and pictures from literally this week.
Yesterday.
Yeah. And I pledged to you, I'm going to use my best gifts to tell those stories, and I know that our community will too. That's why I had you come in and be a part of this today.
I appreciate that so much. And this is one of the things we just get to do. You open, your friend, our mutual friend, Etienne, opened up a space for me to come and share. You then reciprocated what Etienne did by opening up this space for me to come and share. It's how we do it, right? You are it's all I'm doing for the young people is I'm just opening the door to my life and say, no, I'm here. Nobody else might be there, but I want to guarantee you that I am here. And that's all that matters. And from there, beautiful things begin to happen. So thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, no, thank you for being with us. I told people there would be tears shed, and there certainly are on my side, because I just get so moved by this. And it's what we need. It's what the world needs, is people to share those gifts, people to speak up and tell those stories. And it's relevant in all of our communities, whether you're a technologist, whether you are a soccer player, whether you're in a rich neighborhood or you're in a poor neighborhood. And I feel it. And I love the fact you have focused on this pipeline of people, humanity, from the start to a finish. You were telling me about, elementary school kids, but you were also telling me about going on tour buses with the graduating high schoolers to take them to colleges.
Talking about that, it was super cool. Some of the kids that I met when they were in 6th grade, because this is part of the commitment we have made. We've made a long-term commitment to the community. Some of the kids that were in 6th grade are now killing it right now as sophomores in college. And so I was able to take them on a tour, and as we were driving to their first university tour, you can tell the car is full of people whose parents have never been to university. So we are on their first tour and we're driving, and I look back in the van and I asked one of them, Antonio, and I said, Antonio, what did I tell you about this when you were in 6th grade about 4 years ago? And Antonio says, you told me that one day you would take me on a university campus and you put together a platform for me, and what I do from there is up to me. And I said, what are we doing right now? He said, you're doing that. You're doing. I was like, okay, this is because to raise belief, we have to be, we are believable because we do the things and we do them with consistency, right? Another quick thing too, if you don't mind me sharing.
Not at all, please share.
Is that as I was there, so like for instance, yesterday, so in our neighborhood, the gangs that fight against each other are Black and brown gangs primarily. It's Black folks and Mexican folks. My son is mixed, half Black, half white, is mixed. But in the United States, he'll grow up being considered Black. So later on, that's the community he's going to hang out with. Part of the reason why I do this and to coach in a space that is diverse, but that has a lot more Mexican kids, is I want my son, who is 7 now, to watch me take care of these Mexican boys and young people and girls, to take care of them, so that later on, when he comes to a place where people are making choices about, oh, I'm in this gang, I'm in that gang, I do this, he can say, but that's not who we are. The Musichas, that's not that my dad used to do that differently, right? This is the legacy we are wanting to leave behind.
Yeah. Your concept of normal for your children is based on your actions and what you do.
Absolutely. We can't wait to do this in the future. We have to model it like right now.
Yeah.
In fact, I'm a little bit bummed because I was planning on having my daughter, who is 9, sit in front of me as I speak, and she had to, for some reason, she had to leave with her mom. But I was hoping she's here so that she's continuing to remember these things. Last year, 2 years ago, when we worked to get a few of our friends off our streets into an apartment studio for the first time. These people have been on the streets, homeless for years and years and years. When we did that, we were standing in that room and I pulled our children together and I said, I want you to remember that this is who we are. We fight these battles for humanity. So even at 4 and 5 and 6, they are seeing that the world can be a different place.